Good morning, everyone, and happy Thursday. It's Thursday, so we're back for another round of Voices of Resilience. And before I introduce our awesome guest, I just wanted to remind you about Lost and Found. My name is Nathan Hofer, as you can see on the bottom corner of the screen over here. It's mirrored. But that's not important. What is important is these conversations we're having in conjunction with all these partners we get to work with, but with Lost and Found as the organization that I get to work with every day, and we're focused on collegiate mental health. We focus on building resiliency in college students, and as we look to grow and expand in other areas as well, we want to make sure that we are providing our communities with the tools to be well, because life throws you curveballs. We've all been a part of that in the last year here, 2020. What a year, everyone. But we focus on building resiliency and providing preventative factors for to give stronger mental health and well-being for students and those that we serve. So I'm excited to do this work and be able to help students find what it is that gives them not just support, but also some purpose. So today I get to introduce one of my very good friends, Dr. Erica Whitiker. Now, Erica is the Director of Student Activities and Engagement, right? That's the title?
Yes.
Out at Black Hills State University. We've worked together for a lot of years, working with the National Association for Campus Activities, and we've known each other for a while. So I was really excited to be able to invite Erica to join us here. As we have a lot of things to talk about, and I'll let Erica introduce herself a little bit more here. But I'm just so pumped to get to spend an hour with you and have it be for work, Erica.
I know. I'm so excited. I'm grateful that you even thought of me, Nathan. So excited to have this conversation. It's a very important conversation around resilience and, mental health. And so I'm excited. Thank you for having me. And so, like Nathan said, I work out at Black Hills State University and their student engagement and leadership area. I have been at Black Hills State for 8 years. Long time. I'm originally from New Jersey. And so that transition from the East Coast to the Midwest was something. But Spearfish is beautiful, and I'm grateful to be here. But it will lend itself to a lot of the conversations that we'll have over this next hour as to what that's been like. Other than that, I don't know. I am just a happy person, and I love to be outdoors with my beautiful family. They're in a picture behind me, and then we'll get into that as well. And I love to solve puzzles. So if you like puzzles, then we'll be good friends.
Oh, you and my wife should be friends, because when I start doing a puzzle, once I get the corners, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah, I like brain puzzles, like strategy puzzles.
Oh, good. That I can get behind. Ooh.
Yeah, super nerdy. I love it.
Regular puzzles stress me out, and
Yeah.
that is another conversation. This is not the place for me to air out my puzzle grievances. But yeah, so Erica, like I said, I was really excited to have you on the show for a lot of reasons. But one thing you said to me the other day as we were just discussing and preparing was, you get to live in a lot of marginalized identities.
Multiple, yes.
Yeah, that really hit home for me, because I never, it never really clicked with me initially, because I was just thinking about one or two, but I was like, you are as you said, a Black queer woman that's like three marginalized identities, and that has to be incredibly I can't even understand that experience. I've said that every week the last 3 weeks. It's like, I'm not really probably the best person to talk about this stuff, but that's okay. That's okay, because I want to have these conversations. But
yes,
I guess I wanted to bring that up because I think it'll shape, for anyone watching, it'll shape our discussions as we go forward. And so for those watching right now live with us, if you have questions for Erica, please post them. We'll be able to see them. But we I say this every week too. You don't want to hear me the whole time, so we want to hear from you. So if you have questions or comments, toss them into the comments here, and we will address them as they come through. So Erica, with that in mind, though, the what was you talking about? Your multiple identities.
Mm-hmm.
How does that has that affected your? Well, I mean, it's affected probably everything, of course, but especially in the last couple months. What has been? How has that affected you? Like the current state of affairs in our country. I mean, our world, of course, but our country especially. It feels like we have had some struggles.
I think that there's multiple layers there, right? Because we are in June, so it's Pride Month, and I am a proud member of the LGBTQIA community. And so that's a space where we're like, whoa, let's celebrate all that we've, accomplished and how far we've come, and yet remember the work that there still is to do, right? And so, exciting point though, in my LGBTQ identity is that the Supreme Court just ruled that workplace discrimination covers the LGBT community as well. And I was like, finally, I mean, sad they had to rule that, but finally we can't be discriminated against because of our sexual orientation or identity. And so that's exciting. And at the same time, there's Black Lives Matter protests and unrest around the country because yet another unarmed Black man was murdered at the hands of police officers. But at the same time, a Black woman was murdered while she was sleeping in her home. And at the same time, a Black man was murdered while jogging in a park in Georgia. And at the same time, a Black man was called, like the police was called on him in New York because he just asked a woman to leash her dog and she said he was threatening her life. And so there's just so much going on in our country. And while also then as a woman, they're still trying to roll back my rights on my body. And so there's just a whole lot of things happening in the world right now that can seem a little bit overwhelming. But at the same time, I am hopeful because I'm like, people are speaking up, people are speaking out, people are more motivated than before, and that's exciting. But I will say that it makes it difficult sometimes to show up as this whole person, because of those identities, because of the uncertainty in our country. There's places that I don't know that I should visit right now because of the climate in our country. There's establishments that I don't know that I'm welcome to patronize because of the climate in our country. And so how does that show up in my work, and how do I show up for my students during times like this? And what I found is that it's important for me to speak up and speak out. I thought that, well, if I'll have these opinions and I'll share them with my inner circle, but I won't say anything out loud. I don't want to come off like I'm not a resource for students. But at the same time, I realized that my silence meant I wasn't a resource for other students, and that I need to use the influence and the power that I have to call out and name injustice, and then challenge those around me to do the same and to rise to the occasion. So one of the things that I'm really excited and proud of is my university put out a statement after the series of incidents around the country involving Black people. We put out a statement saying that our institution is not one that will tolerate this, that this is a problem that affects everyone, and that we will do our part in naming injustice and calling it out and making sure that our campus is inclusive and safe. And I was really thankful for our president to be willing to make that sort of statement and to allow me to help write that and to be a part of it. Because we live in a rural white town where a lot of people think that those things are other people's problems and that they're not our problems. And that statement that our institution made said, this is all of our problem. This is all of our issue to fix and to acknowledge. And that's the first time that I've been out here in Spearfish where I felt fully seen for all of the pieces that make me me. Um, and so that was really positive. And so in that way, I'm like, okay, there's work to do, but there's people willing to do the work, you
That's
know?
awesome. I don't know why, but that I I've always been a pretty emotional person, but man, I've become a hot mess in the last since I had girls. But I was tearing up here for just some of the stuff you were saying, and I'm going to give a quick shout out to you. I mean, I have a super biased opinion of your president. I really love Lori Nichols, and so I'm really proud of that she not didn't just step up, but she listened and then stepped up. And I
Yeah.
think that's awesome. And I think that's what we're trying to do with these conversations is listen so we know where the need is and step up.
And step up. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know why. I was like, what is happening? Why am
Oh,
I tearing up? What is going on with me? Oh my god, terribly embarrassed. You mentioned something too, like being able to show up for your students. Um, that hit me in a special way because I probably mentioned this on our live cast before, but I worked in higher ed for about 10 years, and I was the thing I loved the most was our students, that and being able to be there for them. So I guess I just wonder. I guess it's kind of a twofold question for you. Like
mm-hmm.
how did you feel like you were, with that dichotomy, because I know you'll explain it more, but being able to really authentically be there for your students now, as opposed to a couple years ago where you felt like there was that separation. But then now, as we look ahead, I mean, it's kind of a scary time for higher ed, for students, for faculty, for staff, like, because there's a lot of unknowns, and we're about to head back. August isn't that far away,
No, it's not.
it's come like a hurricane, and yeah, I mean, I wonder with that, like, what does that look like for you as well, and your students, because this is, I say it all the time, and I'm tired of saying it's unprecedented, but it is unprecedented. Like, when I have never seen such a shift like this, and I guess, like, how do you continue to be there for your students with all these things coming up?
Whew, I think that's a layered question, right? And so the
Yes,
first
sorry about that.
and so the first piece of it is um how do I get to show up fully now where as opposed to in years back I couldn't, right? That's like the first piece of it. The question. Okay. And so when you and I talked about a week ago, I was just saying, like for me, I, yes, I am a part of the LGBTQ community, but that's a new unveiling for many in my life, and so and so a couple of years ago, like I've always been and always will be. I've always been an ally and always been a place where students can feel safe. But at the same time, I wasn't fully able to live in my own authenticity. And so I feel like I held back and I pulled away, and that I wasn't fully a resource in like the way that I could have been because I was dealing with my own space of navigating my own identity in the LGBT community. Um, and I'm really grateful that now I am in a place where I can be fully open and fully transparent and show up for my students in a way that's like, hey, I have been there. I have navigated these same spaces and here's how I can be a resource or here's how I can support you as well. Um, it doesn't always look like this grand story of, oh, when I was 8 years old I knew, or I am in my 30s and I'm finally being able to fully live out loud, and I never knew what weight not living fully out loud was doing. I like thought that I was great, and I didn't realize how much of my self I muted in my leadership, and that also shows up in being Black at a white institution. I didn't realize how much of my Black identity I was muting as to not offend. This Spearfish is a wonderful community, beautiful. But when I moved here in 2012, it was not very diverse, you know. And for a very long time, I was the only African American woman that even worked at the university um, for a very long time. Now there's two of us. Woo! But that's still not
Double the numbers.
right. Like that's still not enough to feel like you can show up wholly and
Uh-huh.
authentically. Um, and I had harder conversations, but not the hardest conversations. I challenged, but I didn't. Well, I pushed, but I didn't fully challenge.
Mhm.
And in the last 3 years, I have really just come into a space where I'm like, this is all of me, and I need to show up fully. And then in the last 2 years, when being able to come out as a member of the LGBT community, that has been a whirlwind of freedom, and it's really impacted how I can show up for all of my students. Because because it doesn't matter if like you're struggling to come out, or if you're feeling like you don't belong here because of your race or ethnicity, or because of your national origin, or if you just feel like this isn't a space that's welcoming. All of those things are very difficult to navigate without counter spaces or safe spaces. And I hope that my presence here is a counter space to all of those things that my marginalized identity students feel like they don't have a space. I hope that I am that counter to that.
Yeah.
That I am someone that they can feel comfortable coming to and sharing with, and that together we can build even larger spaces. I don't want me to be the only. Like, I am here to be a catalyst for change, and I acknowledge that that is why God has put me in this place and at this season in my life, and at this season in this country. I am grateful that I am here, that I can continue to advocate and have voice for what's happening in the world, so that no one's like, oh, that's big cities, that's not us. No, that's everybody. This is everybody's, issue. Um, and I think that that is how and so when we look for and so we look toward August, right? And students are going to come back to our campuses after what, March, April, May, June, July, after 5-6 months
That's
of,
so crazy.
right. And so they're going to come back after 5.5 months of uncertainty. Like everybody that's been home just hasn't had maybe the most positive experience, and so they could be coming back battling a lot of things that college allows them to escape from, and at the same time just coming back, but unsure and uneasy to be here given what's happening as far as health and safety. And then on top of that, if they're battling any spaces where they don't feel like they fully belong because of an identity that they belong to, that's just a lot of layers to challenge and to overcome. And then we're like, and they need to be a successful student. Thank you. And so I am thinking a lot about August and what that mental health space is going to look like for our students, and what's needed, and what resources are going to be needed in order for them to be the most successful. And then just as an institution, we need to rise to the occasion, even with declining enrollment and budget shortfalls across the nation. We still need to rise and be there for the students, in whatever way that looks like. And I think we're all still trying to figure out what that really looks like for August.
Yeah. I actually I had an opportunity just gosh, it's today Thursday, Tuesday night, 2 nights ago, to talk to a few of the campus chapter presidents from at the institutions we serve.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one thing they mentioned is like there's still some fear about what happens if they like if something happens again, you know, like what's that gonna be like? Oh, everything's
Mm-hmm.
gonna move virtual, and there's some anxiety and some like you know they're excited to come back and be with people, but there's all these layers, and they you know they're at different levels of student involvement and engagement. Some are
Absolutely.
RAs, others are involved in internships and work. You know, it's all this stuff, and it's like how stressful that feels for them. It's not necessarily going away just because they're coming back. You know, there's
Right.
fear about what could happen and how disruptive this thing is
Yeah.
this pandemic, you know. And so I know that what you're talking about is very much like a you know we're talking mental health a little bit here, but you know it seems like a lot of students, you know, even the ones that I would consider the ones that you would turn to for you know successful leadership, but also academic success, you know, they usually seem to have at least you know some base that keeps them in a pretty good space, are experiencing this you know constant state of stress and worry and anxiety, and like how easy is that going to be for if something happens to just kind of set them off in a terms of like it's really easy to take one step further into a depressive episode or something
Mm-hmm.
else. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm sure that's got to be at the forefront of your mind for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, because my work is student engagement, right? And leadership development. And so just making sure that we are being a resource for our students. But something that I'm really going to challenge us to do this year more than we have in the past is really focusing on educating our campus community about what's happening in the world. Um, like racial injustice and human rights are not political issues. Those are human issues. Those are everyone's issues. And I think that we need to use the opportunities that we have to highlight what's happening in the world, and then how can we help continue to be a catalyst for change within our community and within our institutions. And I think that in that space, it's really going to help that we show up for students in a more broader way. When I'm thinking leadership development and engagement and civic engagement, making sure that as a institution that we're showing up wholly and fully, versus just here's this great comedy show, but just having some harder and more real conversations this year, because students are showing that that's what they want and that that's what they need. And then having some more conversations and resources around resilience and their mental health, and having those resources be made the norm and not a stigma. So we're like, oh no, we can't program about that, or we can't talk about that. Um, but like really incorporating more deep and profound conversations into the work that we do.
Love that. Love that. Um, you know, I some of the things you said just made me think about another question. And like I said, anyone who's watching, if you have questions, hit us up too. But one of the things that you mentioned a couple times now, um, let's just call it is we're Lost and Found is a South Dakota based organization. We're looking to we're looking to expand to the region, you know, but right now all our universities are here
Mm-hmm.
in South Dakota, which is wonderful. I love South Dakota. South Dakota is home for me. But you mentioned, you said, Spearfish is a kind of a rural white community, and most of our communities in South Dakota are rural white communities. I just was thinking about it, like I grew up in a small town in South Dakota here. And we, I don't think we had any people of color in my I know we didn't have any people of color in my graduating class, like 100%. Mind you, my graduating class is like 20 people because, ridiculous, but that's neither here nor there. So what, gosh, and I also think, I also think that, this stuff that happened with, George Floyd specifically being in Minnesota, it's so close. Like, I think a lot of times we have people who felt insulated from that.
Right.
So what are your thoughts and your, what's your feedback on being a person of color in the state of South Dakota, and especially in the realm of the higher ed community? You already mentioned you're one of two, Black members of your institution. So what I guess how does that affect? I mean, I think it affects everything probably, but like, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. Let me figure out where to even start, right? And so, like I said, Spearfish is a beautiful community, and I'm grateful that I live here. But it is very much wrought with the daily micro aggressions, more so micro invalidations that happen. And sometimes that can be a little bit taxing. Or, so like an example that I gave the other day, I did a radio interview and I said, every time out, someone asked me where I'm from, and I'm like, I am from Spearfish. I live in Spearfish. No, but where are you really from? Right. And depending on my mood, there's times when I'm like, Spearfish, and other times I'm like, oh, I'm originally from New Jersey, But ultimately, when that happens to me, it is a reminder to me that I don't belong here, that I am not fully a part here, that they see me as an outsider, and why can't I be from Spearfish? Why is that out of the question? And I understand that people don't mean it in the way that it comes off, but it's just another instance where it's like, oh, we know you're not really a part of our community, but I'm glad you're here, kind of, but where are you from, to remind you that you don't fit here. And that's something that I'm trying to fix on our campus, because my students that are of marginalized identities say the same thing. They're constantly asked, well, where are you from? Oh, are you here on an athletic scholarship? Oh, are you? Why? Because they have a marginalized identity. They can only be here to play a sport. How come you, like, why aren't they here for college like everyone else? Like, why did there need to be a special exception? And so that's a culture that I'm really trying to change here on our campus. And as a result, it will change out in our community. But that's definitely been one area for my dissertation. It's focused on social justice and retention of marginalized students in rural, predominantly white institutions. And a lot of the research that and what came out of the research is that our marginalized students don't feel like they belong, that they have a space. They're constantly reminded that they're a visitor in this white space. And I want to fix that, because we all belong and we all deserve to be here, and we've all worked just as hard. I mean, I can't tell you how many times visitors will come to campus and they think I'm a custodian, and there's nothing wrong with being a custodian. Like, grateful for the work that they do, but why is that your first inclination? No, I am a professional here. I am a doctor. Like, no, but because of what I look like, or maybe perhaps I'm wearing jeans that day, they're like, oh, are you the custodian because there's a spill in the bathroom? And I'm like, no, I run the building, but I'll get the custodian, And so just yeah, yeah. bless their hearts. And so those are spaces where I know that there's work to be done, and I know that I need to speak up and continue to advocate for the students that have voice, that this is how they feel. Um, and so in that regard, that's what being Black in higher education in South Dakota, it is that using your voice and sometimes being criticized about it, but that's okay. I have dealt with a lot of racial microaggressions, micro insults, micro invalidations during my 8 years here, but it's made me be able to be a stronger advocate and resource for inclusion and equity in our system. I even I even had a faculty member tell a student that they shouldn't work with me because I was too aggressive and all of the words they use for strong women. And then went even further to say that I was a like that this faculty member was very upset that I was a representation for Black people because there's nicer Black people. And I was like, they said what? Yeah, floored. But that only fueled even more why I needed to finish my dissertation work, because there's a lot of work to be done in this rural system. And I'm happy to be doing the work. So,
Well, I'm going to make an assumption, but I'm going to say, I'd also like to say there's probably nicer white people. Gosh, that's hard. Before
yeah.
I had a couple, something I wanted to follow up on, but I had a couple comments come in. One, we'll start with this one because it's just a nice one. It's a good one.
Oh, my godmother.
There it is.
She's awesome.
Well, she should be proud of you. You are pretty awesome. And then I have a question here from, I may say your name wrong. I apologize. Chaka. Bringing change is much needed. Will this be discussed as a forum on your campus? Do you have a proposed plan to introduce the topic?
I don't know that it will be discussed as a full forum on the campus, but it will be incorporated into new student orientation this year. This will be the first year that we are including a diversity and inclusion component into new student orientation, given the climate of our country. Yeah, I am very excited. Granted, I coordinate orientation, and I probably could have done it sooner. But again, it's that fine line of I don't want people to harp that, oh, of course she included diversity and inclusion. But now I'm past that space. And so my dean of students was like, we need a diversity and inclusion component. I was like, we do. I'm glad you said it. So now I'll do it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Right. And so I will be including that in new student orientation in August, as well as continuing to have some more bold conversations. But I don't know that it will be necessarily in a forum. Yeah.
Jaga thinks that's awesome.
Thank you.
I do as well. That's really cool. Yeah, this is not part of the discussion. I'm curious. Are you going to do an in-person orientation, or is it all online?
It is an in-person orientation.
That's awesome. I pronounced it correctly. Sweet. Sorry, Chaka just told me I got it right.
Yes.
Thank you. I needed that affirmation. I'm really bad at names. It's a problem. Working on it. But yeah, I think there's just such power in having in-person. I love this that we're doing, Erica, but I'd much rather go grab coffee with you. And right. That's just not where we're at, and I think that's really powerful that you're going to do an in-person orientation. That's really cool.
It is going to be a lot of work, but it will be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it's a whole other conversation for another time, but I've just been thinking about all my friends in higher ed who work in res life and activities and orientation and oh gosh, and I'm just like, man, I am so sad for how much this has affected your work, and often not in a positive way. Because some positive things I think have come out of this, but
absolutely,
it's unfortunate. But my heart goes out to all of you, like I said, because I was in that space for a long time, and apparently I left at the appropriate global pandemic time. It turns out. Um, shoot. Uh, One thing you said though that I wanted to follow back up with, you know, obviously we talk about resilience. That's kind of our thing. That's like, you know, when we talk about Lost and Found, I want people to be like, oh yeah, the resilience people, and not just like, hey, where did I lose that hat? You know, I want them to think about resilience. But you mentioned like you have had to deal with, I think you said 8 years of a lot of these micro things, these micro aggressions, micro, you know, all these things, but even probably some big things. But I know that's only part of your story. So, what has kept you? I guess what's kept you going? What's kept you being willing to get back up every day? Because you mentioned, you know, 8 years of some of this stuff, and for that, you know, some might be well-intentioned people, but and maybe you see through that, but it's like it's got to be hard to keep doing that, and you're still there, and you're still, you know, I would say battling a little bit, but you're advocating, you're trying to do all this stuff. But so how have you retained some semblance of resilience over the last, well, decades?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in South Dakota 8 years, but I've been in higher education for 12. So yeah, like as a professional, and then it's just a college student at a PWI. So that's been 20 years since I started undergrad.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that either. That's been
I'm
like,
getting old. Like what in the no, it can't be 20 years. 17 years since I started undergrad. I was about to freak out.
I was gonna say I don't think so, because I think we're close, and I was like, I thought it
Yeah.
was, you know, 15 to 17, but I know I'm graying out, so I understand.
Yeah. So I like started college in 2003, 17 years ago. That is something. Anyway,
Yeah, I don't like to talk about it.
right?
Let's keep moving.
I think it comes in waves, right? And so I think the first time I realized I was experiencing racial battle fatigue, I don't know if you know that term, but it was coined during a study of African American males that attended predominantly white institutions, and it was on their mental health, honestly, and how they were able to, well, their mental and their physical health, and how they were able to cope with the daily micro and macro aggressions while also being a successful student, and if they were an athlete or if they were involved in student government or programming boards and things like that. And what the study showed is that these African American males had higher blood pressure, higher cases of mental illness, dealing with anxiety, depression, things of that nature. And what came out of it was that they were experiencing racial battle fatigue. And for me, the first time I realized that was what was happening to me, because I couldn't figure out why. I was just really losing motivation. I was burnt out. I was tired of being the one like asked to speak all the time about the Black issues. I was tired of being the one asked to give guest lectures only in February. Um, I was I was just tired, and I was like, what is going on? And I like started reading, and I came across racial battle fatigue, and I was like, this is it. This fully explains it. And that was around the time when Sandra Bland was murdered. So that was probably about 4 years ago. And I just couldn't come to work. So when she was murdered by police, I like took it so hard, and I was like, sadly, I was like, this happens all the time. Why is this one different? But I realized that one could have been me, right? She was a college educated Black woman pulled over for failure to signal and then died at the hands of the police. And that one hit me so hard, because that could have been me. Um, and and I said, okay, it's time to get back in the game. It is time to keep having these conversations, because someone someone needs what I have to share. I know that I'm put at this institution for a reason. I know that God has placed me here, and clearly someone needs the things that I have to share. And that helped to revitalize me again. But then I went back down and I'm like, oh, all right, I am tired of dealing with the daily aggressions that come along with being one of the only people of color. And then now I'm part of the LGBT community. And so somehow people think I'm an expert on that now. And I'm like, no, I just love who I love. Like, I don't have a degree in this, you know? And so I was actually going back on like a down where I'm like, I am burnt out again. I'm struggling. It's taking a toll on my health. And then something else happened, and it reminded me again that this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the work that I'm supposed to be doing. But the thing that helps me the most, that gets me through it, is community. Like when you asked me that question, the first thing that came to mind was community. I have a village of family and friends here that I've created in Spearfish that we are a strong family. None of us really have family here. I mean, I'm grateful that my mom moved out here with me. And so I've always had my mom the whole time I've been here. But now I have my beautiful fiance, I have my children, I have very, very close friends. And that village and that circle of community is what has allowed me to be resilient, and what has allowed me to continue having these hard conversations, knowing that I have a system that has my back fully. And that's something that I really stress for my students, is building a space of community here on the campus. One of my proudest moments is we have a student organization called Pride, and they are the club for the LGBTQIA community. And this year, they just did such an amazing job of building community and building a safe space. They were a force to be reckoned with, and it just made my heart so, so proud. And that's what I want for all of our students. I want all of our students to find a space where they can have community. We are lacking here in the like Black Student Union, or like Latino, Hispanic caucus, or any of those identity groups. But that's something that I want here, because they need community, and they need a safe space as well. And so while I can be that for them, and they can come in my office and just hang out for hours, which a lot of the African American and Latinx students do, which I welcome. I also want them to have a space. And at our institution right now, we don't have a multicultural office or a diversity and inclusion office, or anything like that. And I hope that at some point soon we can start having those conversations, and move toward building that center for equity and inclusion, so that our students that feel like they don't have a space can. Yeah. And
Communities.
that would impact student retention,
Yeah.
because my study showed that 50% of the students that participated in my study dropped out before, like they dropped out after their freshman year. And then the 50% that persisted through were either athletes or heavily involved in student organizations. And why is that? They had a community and they had a system. And so I want that for all of our students, especially our students of marginalized identities.
That's awesome. That's something that's actually come up the last couple of weeks as we talked about resiliency as community. I know we're getting kind of close to the end here, but I have a couple quick, well, not quick questions. Don't want to leave this one hanging though. So, as you're talking about community, like how do you build? I mean, what was your experience building a community when you came from New Jersey to South Dakota to? I mean, I love the Black Hills; they're beautiful, but Spearfish really is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Like it's not close to a lot of things. So did you go about building a community, and how would you recommend for others who maybe feel like they don't have a community to build that, to have that extra layer of support?
Yeah. It was hard, and there was a lot of stumbles along the way in terms of finding a safe space where I felt like I could land. And so I'd say the first step is honestly, and this is gonna sound the weirdest, but when I know that someone else is of a marginalized identity, I'm just like, hey, how are you? I go out of my way a little bit more to like
Mhm.
speak because that initial familiarity is there. And I'm like, that seems like a safe space. The other way that I personally went about it was I just started having some really bold conversations and seeing who stuck around. Um, and and I wasn't entirely sure if that was going to alienate people from me, or if that was going to gravitate others toward me, and it did both. And the ones that stuck around for those really tough conversations around race, gender, equity, inclusion, like we have some really hard hitting conversations, and then those that stay around for those conversations, honestly, we have formed a really strong community. And so for students, I would say that it is the same thing, to be authentic and to put yourself out there, and the people that are for you, they will stick. And if any of my Black Hill State students are listening, I am here, and I can help start that space or that feeling of community in a village, because that is really really important for the success of students. And so I mean, it can start with me, and but it certainly won't end with me, because I would make sure that they build and they find their tribe. And my tribe is not just people of color or just LGBTQ people. It is just people of like mind that believe that human rights are human rights, and that they're not political issues, and that racism is wrong, and that people should love who they love. And and so my tribe is a lot of different people from different backgrounds. Now a good chunk of us are in the LGBT community, a nice chunk of us are African American, or Hispanic. My partner is Hispanic, and so we have that Black and Latina mixture going on in our circle, and then LGBTQ, but also just people who have a like mind, and we have a good solid network where we can support and affirm each other.
And we got a shout out for you.
Well, that is my fiance, so
Say, I thought so.
thank you, love you.
Nice. Thank you for supporting our Erica right here on our live cast. I wouldn't call it a podcast, but that's not what this is. So that spending time with you right now, it's awesome. We've a lot of stuff that you've shared today. Just like it gives me a lot of hope. I'm really excited to see especially what happens at Black Hills State. But as we see this ripple effect, I hope across our region and the country. I'm proud to know you. I'm proud to call you a friend, and I'm so thankful that you were able to spend some time with us here. And before we pop offline here, do you have any last bits of anything you want to share? Any actions you want to see? Anyone listening, like what are some things that people can do? What are some things you want to share? Last thoughts. We could talk for like 4 hours, and
Yes, we could. I know. I'd say final thoughts or last thoughts. One, I'm hopeful. I am optimistic for where we are going. I am optimistic about the momentum that has been happening across the country, and I'm grateful for the conversations that have been happening just right here in South Dakota. That we realize that we are not exempt from the racial injustice or just injustice in general that's happening in the world, that we have a part in making that better right here in our own backyard. And so that's been very comforting to know that there are people in South Dakota that are speaking up and standing out. The thing that we all could do is that we all can be doing that. All of us should be active participants in dismantling racial injustice and injustice against the LGBT community. It is all of our responsibility to make sure that this is a place where everyone is free to live and thrive. And speaking from a higher education perspective that my institution is one where everyone is free to learn and grow and be. And that's going to take more than just the marginalized groups speaking out. It's going to take everyone to stand up and do that work. And I hope that this is a call to action. I hope that I inspire people to use their voice and to empower themselves to then empower others to have these harder conversations. That is what I really want to see in this next year as we reopen in August for our campus.
That's awesome. Like I said, thank you, Erica, for being here with us. For those of you watching, whether it's now or later, remember these are just snippets. We're spending a little bit of time together. These are the start of conversations of we talk about hard things, we're vulnerable about things, and we try to say how we've dealt with them, and we move forward. So take these and continue those conversations. Feel free as well to connect with us with Lost and Found or via social media, Instagram, Facebook. This is our handle. Just look for Resilient Today. Reach out to us if you have more questions for Erica specifically. Send that our way, and we can get those to her, and she can reach out to you. I said it's an awesome that we have so many people who are willing to come and spend an hour hanging out with me in my basement. But it's seriously just it's great. And next week we have a good friend of mine as well, Sadie Sweer, coming on. So tune in next Thursday. I think we're at 2:00 next Thursday, 2:00 Central. So join us here again on Facebook. And Erica, thank you again so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm grateful that I said I got to spend an hour with you just for fun, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I got to learn a lot. So thank you, and thank you to everyone watching. And hopefully we'll see you around here soon.
Bye.